Hi, it's been quite a while since I've been able to make this kind of video because of unfortunate inconveniences that's been going on in my life the past 2 weeks. But I promised on everything that there's not going to be any more inconvenience, not including school, which started for me today because apparently I'm doing online shit, so I still have all the free time in the world. So yeah, the reviews are back, starting with this one, and yeah, hope you guys enjoy it. And yes, I did get a much more of a fuckboy haircut, and I have an almost clean shaven baby face. But I guess I should probably go back to the original spot of where I record, huh? Alright, just give me a minute. There we go. Now you can look forward to seeing a slightly more attractive Gerardo for a few months until I eventually grow out my facial hair and my hair out again, and I start looking like a fucking ugly and very disgusting, depressed man fucking looking dude with a big ass hair and beard. I don't know. I wish I could stay like this forever, but it's not gonna happen.
This right here for the number one shit with your number one. You ain't number one.
What is up, my beautiful people? My name is G-Vance and welcome back to my channel. And today we're gonna be talking about this new album by Dave East entitled Karma 3. And yes, I fucking miss saying that. This is the official second studio album by Dave East, I believe. Comes to us about 2 years since the second Karma mixtape came out back in 2018, I believe. And this is also a follow-up to his more recent project entitled Survival, came out last year. I felt that was a pretty dope introduction to people who haven't heard Dave East's music before, as he pretty much becomes a lot more successful and is under a big label this time instead of being an independent artist. So amongst other new school rappers and a few OG rappers that have done this sort of long running mixtape or album series that some people would consider to put them on the map and get them a lot more popular, Dave East continues with the third installment of his very popular Karma mixtapes that started back in 2017, and which in my opinion that is probably one of his best series in my opinion. The Karma mixtapes were his best work in my opinion. It showed a lot of his true potential. It just showed what of a great artist he is, and that he does have the force and pretty much the potential to be a fucking force to be reckoned with and to be a fucking lyrical monster in this whole rap genre scene. And for those of you that have never heard of Dave East before, let me give you a bit of insight of what he pretty much does. Dave East is a rapper from New York. I think he specifically is a part of Harlem, and the style that he pretty much does is he pretty much does a tribute to that OG or old head hip-hop sort of vibe that a lot of people tend to call a lot, and he gives it a bit of a modern twist. A lot of his projects sound really old school, they sound really OG. They gave you a bit of that boom bap 90s rap vibe, but he does add his own little modern twist by not only including a few modern rap elements to it, but by also contributing with a few great modern lyrical rappers that also give a sort of a tribute to and it's sort of hats off to the OG rap vibe as well. And so I do think that's pretty dope of him to do, because yeah, he is a new school rapper. He's only in his mid-30s. I don't think he technically was around when that whole OG shit was going on back then, but I do really love that he does that, because not that many people these days like to pay their respects to OG rap, because we're so used to this new modern way that hip-hop has changed so much. And I feel that people seem to forget that OG rap was pretty much a really great and amazing thing back in the day, and it's the reason why we have all these new artists that are giving this new and for some people amazing sound of hip-hop. With that being said, considering that we are talking about the third installment of the Karma series, one of Dave East's most popular series and in my opinion his best work ever, is this third installment as good or better than the last two projects? Yes and no. As its own project, I do think it's a pretty decent album, and I don't really feel any regret of hearing it. But as a third installment to a long, lasted series that came out back in 2017, I don't think it's the best one in the series. See, what made the past, Karma series so great is because at the time, Dave East wasn't really like considered, that much of a great artist in hip hop. I don't think that many, hip hop fans like knew who he was at the time. He had a small amount of fans. He was super underrated and very underground. He was a pretty much like an underground hero at the time, in modern day times of hip hop. And I feel that the Karma series was him pretty much going on this new quest to fame, trying to become an icon, trying to like finally like push his career to points where he didn't think were possible, and pretty much, just deal with that like hard journey of trying to become an icon, trying to become, successful in the rap industry, which is a really, really hard place to get into. And later on, he would have to deal with the karma or consequences of what fame, pretty much brings to you. And next thing you know, a few mixtapes and EPs and one debut studio album later, Dave East is pretty much finally dealing with the consequences and karma of what fame brings to an artist who had, recently risen to fame. And in Dave East's case, it's not too bad. Dave East has achieved everything that he has ever wanted to achieve, providing for his whole family, starting a family of his own, and pretty much, achieving and obtaining, big celebrity, status in his hometown, or in his case, like big OG status. A lot of people, we call him handsome and shit, that's like a little, like, I guess, term that they use in the East Coast for someone who achieved big celebrity status. And so pretty much he includes all of that in this album, and pretty much, brings back that classic boom bap 90 lyrical rap that we all love, and pretty much also brings back that classic storytelling and that humble attitude that we all fell in love with back with Dave East. He pretty much adds a lot of elements that, can create a really classic Dave East album, pretty much Dave East has finally achieved what he always wanted to in his life, provide for his whole family, start a family of his own, and achieving and obtaining, big dog or, OG status, and like, just big celebrity status in general in his hometown. He is not being recognized by like big legends in hip hop. A lot of people look up to him now. That's all he ever wanted, and he pretty much shows all that in this album, as he pretty much brings back once again that OG rap mix with a modern twist, and he also brings back that classic storytelling with the humble attitude that we all fell in love with back when Dave East first started out as an underground hero. He definitely does add a lot of great elements that create a classic Dave East album. Unfortunately, this album does show signs of pretty much Dave East, doing this whole transition from this really great, you know, hardcore lyrical rapper to a much more mainstream artist that not a lot of us are used to seeing when it comes to a Dave East project. Honestly, I think a lot of fans start noticing this big, you know, transition from a lot of their favorite artists into the mainstream. You know, for example, for me, when I first heard the Everybody album by Logic, you know, that was me pretty much, you know, seeing, you know, signs of Logic becoming a much more different artist than how he was, and pretty much, you know, becoming a lot more mainstream as he got more and more popular. Another example is the When It's Dark Out album by G-Eazy. You know, I personally never been that big of a fan of G-Eazy, but I know a few people that have been super big fans of him, you know, since his like really like early days, and they told me that they specifically like started like noticing that transition of G-Eazy becoming a much more mainstream artist when this specific album came out. And I want to make it clear here that if you are a fan of an artist that has dropped that one specific album where you started to see a transition of them becoming a much more mainstream artist, that doesn't necessarily mean that the album was bad. You know, the Everybody album by Logic is a pretty dope album, and so is the When It's Dark album by G-Eazy. You know, those albums are really good albums, you know, depending on who you are. You know, that just pretty much means that after this album, this artist is definitely not going to be the same, and is definitely going to go to a much more like mainstream route. And, you know, whether it's going to be a good change or a bad change, you know, it all depends on how the artist goes about it. And like I said before, this album is where I'm starting to see a transition to Dave East becoming a much more mainstream artist, which again is not like necessarily bad depending on how he goes about it. But for a lot of OG Dave East fans, this may be something that might upset them, or it's just something that they're just not used to, because Dave East is definitely not a mainstream artist. You know, when people compare Dave East to a lot of like the mainstream artists now, you know, Dave East is a fucking like god compared to those mainstream artists. The reason why I started to see a big transition of that specifically in this album is because I've noticed that Dave East has pretty much changed it up a bit in this album. You know, granted, there are a few, you know, like great and classic, you know, Dave East tracks that you would, you know, expect to see in a Dave East projects. There are maybe 5 tracks on here that I didn't really like because of the fact that, you know, they were just too different, and I felt that it wasn't something that Dave East would have like originally done. And that mostly has to do with the features on those tracks. Dave East teams up with a lot of mainstream artists like Trey Songz and A Boogie with the Hoodie, which in my opinion don't really go well with the kind of style that, you know, Dave East was trying to do. You know, Trey Songz is somebody that I haven't heard in a while, but I don't think he specifically is somebody that could be good right next to Dave East. And as for A Boogie with the Hoodie, you know, that man is just a hit or miss artist in general. You know, he can sometimes make some pretty decent tracks when he cares, and then there are some tracks that are just like so fucking stupid that you don't know why he would make them. And that was his case in this album. You know, I don't think he contributed that well to, you know, trying to make a great song and trying to sound as good as Dave East. You know, next to Dave East, A Boogie with the Hoodie, you know, he doesn't hold a fucking candlelight to him. There's this one specific track on here called Unruly with Jamaican singer Popcan, which I really wanted to like, but I guess it just wasn't for me. You know, Dave East pretty much includes a lot of his like, you know, personal like family roots into this album. You know, I think like part of his family is Jamaican, and he wanted to include that in this album, in this song specifically, which I do appreciate. You know, I do appreciate that he's trying to include more of his roots in here, you know, trying to like not forget about his past, you know, trying not to forget about his background, his culture. You know, I do really appreciate that, but I just feel that I guess it could have gone a like much more better, because I don't think that, you know, this sort of like Jamaican mix with rap song like turned out as good. You know, granted, I don't think that many Jamaican mix with modern rap songs are as good, because, you know, a lot of these artists don't really know how to work with it, and they end up, you know, fucking it up real bad. And I don't think Dave East, you know, fucked it up that bad. I just think that it could have been a lot more better, because I just personally wasn't fucking with it. However, the reason why I did end up enjoying this project at some point, the reason why I do think it's a really like decent project, is because the tracks where Dave East is by himself with no features are honestly really good. You know, Dave East, he never really like fails to impress me. You know, he never disappoints me at all. You know, he is a fucking lyrical monster. You know, he has so much clever fucking punchlines and everything. He's a really great storyteller. You know, I think Dave East is just as good here as he was in the past like few projects. And the other reason why this album is really decent is because aside from the few features that I just mentioned, the other, you know, people that are featured on this album are actually really fucking dope and really like made this album sound so fucking great. Doughboy shows up on this album on a track entitled Said What I Said, which is pretty much this sort of like lyrical and hardcore, you know, tag team song. You know, Doughboy is somebody that has shown up on a lot of, you know, past projects with Dave East, and you know, they just honestly always sound so great together. You know, I love hearing them, you know, rap together, because it always seems like they're trying to do this sort of like competition together. You know who can say the most like punchlines, who can like rap more fast. You know, I feel that, you know, every time they're together, they just always give it their all, because, you know, they're sort of like competing against each other, if that makes sense. Speaking of lyrical bangers, Young Dolph shows up on this album on a track entitled Fuck That, which that one might be my favorite track on the album. You know, I wasn't expecting this to sound so great. You know, I've heard a little bit of Young Dolph shit, and, you know, I felt were like decent, but, you know, not as good. You know, I didn't think he was gonna be as good on this album, you know, next to somebody as great as Dave East. But he did prove me wrong, because, you know, he ended up like really like keeping up with Dave East's flow, and you know, like sort of like, you know, contributing to what makes a good Dave East album great. And, you know, honestly, I just wasn't expecting this like really hardcore, you know, sort of like riot song that it just sounded so great, you know, so lyrical, so fucking like metaphorical. You know, it's a song that is really hard to forget, and it's something that I feel I'm going to remember for a very long time now. R&B singer Jazzy shows up on this album on 2 tracks entitled Mission and Broke or Not, and those 2 tracks are pretty much, you know, Dave East and Jazzy, you know, sort of like bringing back that classic R&B and rap, you know, vibe that we all loved back in the early 2000s. You know, it just like, it once again gives you that sort of like chill vibe that you really love. You know, it's like really soulful, it's really meaningful as well. You know, it's sort of like a, you know, sort of like looking back on, you know, past days, you know, sort of like reminiscing on the past. I feel that's what you always feel when you hear these like classic rap and R&B tracks. You know, you feel very nostalgic. You know, same thing goes with the track entitled Know How I Feel with Mary J. Blige, who, in my opinion, I think is somebody's like all-time favorite, you know, R&B artist. You know, she is somebody that everybody knows and love. You know, even if you're not that big of a fan of R&B, you know the name Mary J. Blige. You know, every time you hear her voice, you just like feels so great just to hear that, you know, angelic and soulful, like beautiful fucking voice that not that many people can top these days. You know, I feel that she contributed so well to this sort of like OG rap, you know, sort of like album. You know, I just really enjoyed once again hearing the R&B vibes on this album. And finally, Benny the Butcher of all people surprisingly shows up on this album on a track entitled Stone Killer, and that one is pretty much the sort of like New York versus everybody anthem. You know, I was definitely not expecting Benny the Butcher to show up on this album. You know, especially with someone with Dave East. You know, like I don't think I've ever, you know, heard Dave East or any like Griselda artists team up together before, but honestly they sound so great. You know, sort of like Benny the Butcher, you know, doing the same kind of like style that Dave East does, and you know, they both just sound so fucking great and hardcore together. You know, in my opinion, Benny the Butcher is the best member out of the whole like Griselda crew, you know, based in Buffalo and shit. You know, I just think that Benny the Butcher is a fucking force to be reckoned with. And you know, when you put someone with Dave East, I feel like Dave East pretty much has to like live up to his expectations and sort of like keep up with him, and he did so fucking perfectly. You know, this song is just so fucking amazing. Is once again a song that's really hard to forget, and is a song that I think a lot of people are going to remember as one of the best, you know, modern songs to ever come out this year. Overall, even though I don't think that this album is the best one in the Karma series, I do think that it is a pretty decent project that I don't regret hearing. You know, on its own is a really decent project, and I do recommend this one to all of the Dave East fans that fell in love with the first Karma series. You know, just again, a full warning, I do personally think that this is the album where we're starting to see that, you know, transition and shift change to Dave East becoming a much more mainstream artist. And whether or not that's going to be good or bad, you know, it all depends on how Dave East goes about it. And I personally have faith that he is still going to stay true to himself, because, you know, this man, he never disappoints. And I don't think he'll ever stoop that low to just sort of, you know, just throw everything away to become a basic mainstream rapper. Thank you all so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed my review. Don't forget to like, subscribe, click that bell down below, all that good stuff, so you don't miss a single one of my uploads whatsoever. And don't forget to stay happy.
I'm trying to dodge hate, they keep popping up. I got them coming back, guess it's not enough. Get it in the bag or get it bottled up.